Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, February 23rd, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. We're talking Chiefs today with beat writers Herbie, Teope, and Sam McDowell. Last week, we devoted a show to off-season moves the Chiefs might make with the offense. Today, we're talking defense and special teams. There's plenty of uncertainty on the defensive side with decisions to be made with players like Bashar Briellen, Daniel Sorensen, Damien Wilson, Tanoh Kpassagnon, and Alex Okafor, among others. Herbie and Sam dig deep into the roster and come up with best fits for the Chiefs with some information available that we didn't have when we talked about the offense last week. That is the salary cap number. So let's get started talking Chiefs defense and special teams with Herbie, Teope, and Sam McDowell. Okay, we're back with Herbie, Teope, and Sam McDowell. I say back because we talked last week on this very topic, and that's off-season decisions that the Chiefs have to make with their roster. And we spent last week about a half hour talking about the offense. Today, we will talk about the defensive side of the ball plus some special teams. But before we do, some news has developed between conversations. It involves the salary cap. Herbie, can you take us through the new figure that we have? Because something we've been waiting for a while, and we finally have a little bit of clarity on what the salary cap's going to be.
Yeah, last year during COVID, well, we're still in COVID, the NFL and the NFLPA agreed to a $175 million salary cap for 2021 with the view that we can play football. So that number there was kind of fluid. And what the NFL did, what's today, Friday? What the NFL did Thursday was they informed teams the minimum floor as of right now is going to be $180 million. And there's still some flexibility for that thing to go up. How that affects the Chiefs is before that floor was set, they were projected to be anywhere between $20 to $23 million over the cap. So they were going to have to make some moves. Some good news developed late Thursday night, when the NFLPA put out that the Chiefs would have an additional $5.1 million rollover from 2020 to 2021. Now, I remember our esteemed colleague here, Sam McDowell, he asked Brett Veach during Super Bowl week how this 175 salary cap was going to affect the team. And Veach basically said, from talking to Brant Tillis and Chris Shea, his salary cap gurus, that he was told that they were looking at various models for the salary cap to be anywhere between 175 to 190 million. And Shea and Tillis told Brett Veach that if they were in the 185 million range, they should be okay. So, but they still have to make some moves, because you think about some of the players who count a lot of money against the cap right now. And Sam wrote a phenomenal piece previewing the offensive line. I got the defensive line next, but he pointed out in there how much Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz combined were going to count against the cap. And Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 21 million per, or was that about for each?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, it's combined. Fisher's about 15.
So they still have to make some moves. You're going to have to make some moves, kind of like what they did in 2020 when they got creative with restructuring contracts for notable contracts like Duvernay Tardif and even Frank Clark, turning some of that roster bonus into a signing bonus, or even extending other players out. And that's what they're going to have to do here.
Yeah, the Sam McDowell did right. That was a really good snapshot of where the Chiefs' offensive line issues are. We spent a lot of time on that in our last conversation. And, of course, what complicates that is the health of Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz. So, but Herbie, you mentioned restructuring contracts and deals, and one of the players whose name always pops up in that on that topic is Tyron Matthew, the safety. Will play in the 2021 will be the final year of his deal, and the Chiefs, I think, absolutely want to bring him back on an extended deal that will. Spread the money out a little bit over the length of that deal, depending on how long it is. But I would think that this would be a priority for them, and probably not a difficult sell for Tyron Matthew.
Oh, and I tend to agree. He's embraced Kansas City. The Kansas City has embraced him. He is one of the clear leaders, if not the clear leader, in that locker room outside of Patrick Mahomes, and he absolutely makes sense. He's scheduled to count $19.7 million against the cap right now. So getting him extended and spreading out that money, like you said, Blair, makes one of the most sense on the defensive side when it comes to finding cap relief. And he's got to be up there at the top of the list.
He brings so much, right? But just beyond his level of play, he was when the Chiefs brought him and Frank Clark in after the 2018 season. We were all not skeptical, but what are we getting here? They bid farewell to players like Eric Berry and Justin Houston and Alan Bailey and Dee Ford, et cetera, and they're bringing in Tyron Matthew and they're bringing in Frank Clark. Big money for Frank Clark. Tyron Matthew has absolutely lived up to his billing. And I think he's gone from a Pro Bowl level player to an all pro level player who is on the outside of just on the outside of maybe, Hall of Fame type of conversation. So, I think this is a move that's worked out great for the Chiefs. We can quibble with some of the draft picks that Brett Veach has made in the Brett Veach regime over the last 3 years. But the signing of Tyron Matthew, I think, has been one of the keys to the Chiefs' success over the last few years. You think that's right, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, he's their best defensive player. I mean, he's their most valuable defensive player, and he's also a guy that, as he ages and maybe some of the skill set diminishes, whether it's speed or agility, he's still going to bring you value in other ways. I mean, first of all, he can play multiple positions. We saw him have to play slot corner whenever L'Jarius Sneed got hurt, and then he moved back to safety, his normal position. He didn't have his best Super Bowl, and I keep coming back to this. A lot of guys, and including the entire group that I wrote about today, the offensive line, are going to be judged based on how this season ended. And the Chiefs, when they make these types of moves we're discussing on Wednesday and then again today, they're going to be looking at the entire 19-game picture. And over the entire 19-game picture, Tyron Matthew was Tyron Matthew for most of the season. So, yeah, I mean, he's a guy they want back. And like I said, he's the guy I think they can least afford to lose from this defense, especially, when we talk about the complications of Steve Spagnuolo's defense. I don't think it's by coincidence that the guys surrounding Tyron Matthew are playing really well. Cornerback was a position that we all talked about, that they needed to add another guy there before this offseason started. L'Jarius Sneed plays well. Breeland plays well. Charvarius Ward plays well. And then, a healthy Juan Thornhill as a rookie played well last year. So I think he's a guy who makes his teammates better. And the defense would be immensely different without Tyron Matthew.
You mentioned, Blair, earlier, he's made the transition to all pro as opposed to Pro Bowl. Think about this. All pro selection in 2 straight years in Kansas City. So, yeah, he's a 3-time Pro Bowler on his career, all pro selection on his career. 2 of the 3 happened here in KC the last 2 years.
He's the kind of guy I think is possibly on a Hall of Fame track, too. If the Chiefs continue the team success over the next, whatever the length of his contract would be. So that's an interesting question, too. Do you extend him for a couple of, given his age, his experience, is he extended for a couple of years? Do you go as many as 3, even 4 years with Tyron Matthew? What's the smart play with Tyron Matthew?
4. You got to go long. He's only 28 years old. I mean, he'll turn 29 in May, but he's still relatively young. So I think you got to go. You have to shoot for at least at a minimum 4-year contract extension with this guy.
I wonder, though, what Tyron Matthew's going to be thinking, because, it's his last chance to get a big contract because of his age. So I do think he's going to want the extended deal. But also, he's seen his defensive teammates get paid since he's been here with Frank Clark and Chris Jones. And he's severely outplayed Frank Clark, obviously. And Frank Clark's making, $20 million next year. I don't know that Tyron Matthew's going to be in the mood to give the Chiefs a discount that we're talking about.
That's a good point. And you're right. Look, he was voted the team MVP last year. So, his value, his worth to this team is, it needs to be reflected in a contract for him.
The team MVP is the best non-Mahomes player from here on out.
Well, and this year was Kelsey, so you're right. Yeah, maybe 1 year Mahomes can get into the running for team MVP. Hey, let's stay in the secondary, and there looks like Bashar Brielen's a name that comes up constantly for a decision that the Chiefs are going to have to make. What about Bashar Breeland? Is he a candidate to be brought back, or is he going to become a salary cap casualty?
Well, I think when you look at the cornerbacks, the two guys who are going to be free agents for the Chiefs are Antonio Hamilton and Breeland, but Breeland is obviously the bigger name. But what gets me here is it's 2 straight years where he's had to do a 1-year deal. I don't know if he's going to find the market. He didn't find the market last year. And so that's a little concerning that he couldn't, translate the success he had on the field into a lucrative deal. Does bringing him back make sense? Absolutely. But can the Chiefs afford to let him walk? I think they probably can, given the emergence of L'Jarius Sneed. You can put Sneed out there at Breeland's spot on the right side, and I think he would shine there. They still have Rashad Fenton, who can play inside against the slot wide receiver. He can play nickel. So it really depends on how the Chiefs view Breeland. If there's a market out there for Breeland, if Breeland believes there's a market out there for him, that will determine whether he's back here in Kansas City.
Yeah, I think if Breeland comes back, it's not going to be in that first few days of free agency because he's going to be testing to see if he can get a multi-year deal. That's what he did last year, too. I think that all the negotiating power is going to be in the Chiefs' hands with Bashaud Breeland because he needs them more than they need him. And the fact that he got suspended again last season, I think is going to diminish the market that's out there for him. So I could see him back, but that would be because the market doesn't develop for him.
And the Chiefs bring him back on a team contract friendly deal.
So I think it'd be similar to what was he on a 1 year, $4.5 million?
Yep.
I could see something similar to that.
Okay, how about at linebacker, where they're going to have to make decisions on Damien Wilson and Ben Niemann? Here, Damien Wilson turns in the biggest play of the Super Bowl for the Chiefs. But listen, there was a reason they drafted Willie Gay in the second round last year, and I think the team liked the way Gay was starting to develop until he had the season-ending injury. I would be surprised to see Damien Wilson not with the Chiefs next year. What do you guys think?
I tend to agree with that. They did slap the option on him last year to bring him back on a 1-year deal. But that again, when you use the high draft pick on Willie Gay, that kind of like sends the message, he's our guy of the future. And you've got Anthony Hitchens also still locked up under contract. So of the linebackers there that makes sense to hit the open market, it would be Damien Wilson. Ben Niemann himself, he's a restricted free agent. So the Chiefs can make that low qualifying tender on him. And it's going to depend if he has a market out there, because if the team signs him to a qualifying offer and the Chiefs decide not to match it, then they're owed some compensation. But I could see Niemann back here in Kansas City signing the tender that the Chiefs will, offer him as a restricted free agent.
Yeah, I mean, with Willie Gay, it's an interesting case because if they were for sure going to have the full offseason, which the NFL and NFLPA still haven't announced what they're going to do this offseason, then I think you'd be a lot more comfortable going into next year with Willie Gay, because when you watch him on the tape, he's got all the talent in the world. So when you see his snap count, the only thing you can assume for why he's not playing is just a complete grasp of Steve Spagnuolo's defense. That has to be the reason for it. If he had a full offseason, I think you'd be a lot more confident that he would get there this year. And without it, I just wonder if they feel like they want another veteran guy just in case. But maybe they feel like Ben Niemann can be that veteran guy. He's been in the system for a couple of years. He can back up all 3 spots. So to Herbie's point, that is probably why Ben Niemann is more likely to be back next year than Damien Wilson.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners: unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeat KC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Okay, we've talked about secondary and linebackers, so I wanted to bring up a guy who is kind of a little bit of both, just the way he plays, and that's Daniel Sorensen, who is a safety, but tackles like a linebacker. He ended up leading the team in tackles this year. He was second in defensive snaps, just behind Tyron Matthew. Chiefs also have to come to a decision on him. He strikes me as a guy who probably would have more value to the Chiefs than anybody else, any other team. Just I can't see him having this many snaps at the position he plays on another team. So he almost seems like he's a Chief for life. But that depends on whether the Chiefs are looking to save some bucks. And how about Daniel Sorensen's value to the Chiefs?
Contract year. He had that season on a contract year. But you know what? You're absolutely right, Blair. I think he makes sense to come back. I don't think they're going to have to open the checkbook for him because you hit the nail on the head. What he does for the Chiefs, does another team use a safety like him, like the Chiefs do? And I think off the top of my head, I can't think of that many NFL teams out there that use that kind of hybrid type safety, with the exception of the Tennessee Titans with Kenny Vaccaro. Vaccaro was the kind of guy that does a lot of things that Daniel Sorensen does. So it's going to depend on, does he think there's a market? And if the Chiefs think they can get him back on a deal that's not going to break the bank. And that's the key thing here with him, because Sorensen is not young either.
Right.
In 2013 out of BYU. So he's not young anymore. So I don't think you can open the checkbook for him.
He and is it he and Kelsey and Anthony Sherman are like the original, Andy Reid Chiefs that are still around. So
he might also decide to give a BYU discount because of Andy. You just never know.
There you go. All right, Herbie, you are in the process of writing about the front, the defensive front, and we've got Alex Okafor there, Tanoh Kpassagnon, Taco Charlton. Some players that they're going to have to make some decisions on. One of the things about this time of year is it allows you to evaluate what these guys were this past season, and obviously helps the Chiefs decide on what they want to do. Let's start with Tanoh Kpassagnon. I don't think he has taken the steps that the Chiefs envisioned for him. He just hasn't made the progress, and this may be a place where the Chiefs can save some money.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I love that guy. K-Pass is a good guy, but his numbers dipped from 2019 to 2020. In 2019, I was like, okay, this guy is setting himself up for a nice contract season. But he finished with 4 sacks in 2019, and he wasn't even among the team leaders this year. The thing that strikes me the most is how they use him. There are some instances when you watch him, they will drop him back in coverage. He'll line up on the line, and all of a sudden he's dropping back. He's good on special teams because we know he can block a kick. He got his finger on one
against the Falcons.
Yeah. So but I don't know if you can open bust the bank for Tanoh either. It's the numbers this year just don't justify paying him at a premium as an elite pass rusher. If you can get him back on a 1-year deal and it makes sense, absolutely, I would say do it, because it's he knows what's expected of him in the scheme. And then Spagnuolo, over the past couple seasons, has always talked about his versatility to play so many different spots on the defensive line. But I don't think you can break the bank with him either.
Blair, when you look at the Chiefs as a whole, I guess I should remove offensive line from this statement because we're not exactly sure what's going to happen with the tackles there. So outside of that spot, I think defensive end's a spot where they have to improve more than any other this year, and that is probably going to mean moving on from both Tanoh Kpassagnon and Alex Okafor. That's a spot where, unfortunately, Frank Clark, for whatever reason, hasn't performed to a $20 million contract. I still think Frank Clark has more value than people give him credit for because they judge him based on his salary, and he hasn't lived up to $20 million. which means they got to get somebody else on the other side of that defensive line that can help out Chris Jones in the pass rush. Because right now, when you look at that, Chris Jones is getting double teamed and double teamed and double teamed. The end's got to win one-on-one, and Frank Clark doesn't do it often enough. They've got to have somebody else on the other side that can do it.
Yeah. Okafor's biggest thing is health. He just can't stay healthy enough where the Chiefs can obviously depend on him to be that consistent pass rush edge. And then Okafor started out the season as the starter, but then he got hurt, and then Tanoh Kpassagnon became the starter and never gave it up. So Okafor became a rotational guy. The guy that intrigues me out of the defensive line group there is Taco Charlton. You know, he had moments early in the year before he got hurt. The Chiefs signed him to a one-year prove-it deal. I think you bring him back on another one-year prove-it deal. Taco Charlton's got first-round talent, but he hasn't lived up to it. But I think if you, of the three defensive ends there, the one that makes the most sense to me and probably won't cost a lot of money to bring back is Charlton.
The former first-round pick, and I'm with you on Okafor as well. He's sort of the Sammy Watkins of defense when it comes to injuries, and it's too bad because I think he's got some. I think he's a talented player who I'd love to have seen play 16 games during the regular season, or more than he ended up playing. So. I think. Oh, how about Mike Pennell? There's another one. Maybe the last guy that we need to talk about the interior on the interior. Right. I think the Chiefs are pretty happy with what they have with Jones and Derek Nottie and Pennell in the middle there. It's just a guy that can bring back pretty cheap.
Well, I think that Turk Wharton developing this year as an undrafted free agent makes him probably expendable, even though they're different sorts of defensive tackles. Obviously, Pennell's more of a run stopper. Wharton's a guy that you hope can develop into a pass rusher from a position that doesn't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback typically. But, it's funny, Herbie mentioned that he really likes K-Pass in the locker room. We're talking about like a group that we all think is a pretty good group in the locker room for us. Mike Pennell's the guy who's always available, at least for Herbie and me. And then Alex Okafor, obviously, I mean, that's one of Herbie's favorite guys in the locker room, just a terrific person. So I guess we're probably a little too inside baseball here, but we all root for the signings of the guys who are good quotes and available. Right. And this is a group that would qualify, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, selfishly, Sam and I would love Mike Pennell back, but we got to have the locker room. We would love to have all of them back, but unfortunately it's the nature of the business, and the Chiefs are going to have to make a decision.
Any movement among special teamers? I think Butker certainly is. He had the issues with the extra points this year. Didn't cost the Chiefs a game, and provided the only points for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and was terrific actually with the distance on his kicks. So I don't think there's no threat of losing Harrison Butker. Tommy Townsend. Like so many Chiefs, picked a bad time to have one of his worst games, right, in the Super Bowl. Yeah. Would the Chiefs be satisfied with him enough to bring him back?
I think so, but you know what? This team is also all about competition. So it would not surprise me at some point during this offseason the Chiefs sign another punter like they've been doing over the last couple of seasons and then let them battle it out. But, Dave Toub swears by Townsend's powerful leg. It's just unfortunately, I thought he had a pretty good season actually, but it's just unfortunately what we're going to remember, as Sam has pointed out in his offensive line piece and also has pointed out a couple of times here today, the things we're going to remember are the Super Bowl. We're not going to remember that, he was booming kicks and pinning play the teams inside their own 20. We're going to remember that 29 and 27-yard punt, but that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and his deal was more than I think just a bad day at the office. Like he looked like he was affected by nerves, which I think is a little bit more alarming than it would be if you just didn't have a great day like the offensive line. I mean, he dropped the one ball in his lap as well. I mean, he made 3 pretty big gaffes over just the course of a couple of quarters there in the Super Bowl.
And look, I don't think we'll ever know the deal that I mentioned it. Harrison Butker's extra point problems. How much of that was the holder? And that's Tommy Townsend as well. So, but that'll be a development just to keep an eye on, is what the Chiefs do with the punter. Okay, let's wind this down, and let me ask both of you guys if just the conversation and giving some thought about off-season moves and free agency. Has it changed the way you think about the Chiefs' priority in the draft, and what with the 31, what they might do, where they might go, what they should prioritize in the draft? Sam McDowell, how about what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this probably isn't going to be a popular take, but I think that based on what they need right now, first of all, I always think in the first round you draft best available, as long as it's not a position that you're already just completely stacked at. And I think that they need defensive end anywhere across the offensive line. And then I think they need a second wide receiver as well. So I think best available of any of those three positions. But the part that I don't think is going to be particularly popular is I think the way this roster is constructed right now, they need to collect assets as opposed to drafting one stud. And that fifth-year option in the first round is pretty valuable to other teams, especially if somebody wants to get a quarterback late, perhaps. So I think they should trade out of the first round if that opportunity is there. And if they can get a second and a third out of that, this is an organization that's drafted really well in the later rounds, as well as they have in the first round, at least since Patrick Mahomes. And so I think that my preference for the team, if I'm running things, would be to try and get another asset out of that pick.
I tend to agree with that. If you're able to use free agency to address your glaring needs, such as defensive end or offensive line, for example, it makes more sense to trade out of there, okay, and accumulate more draft picks, because this draft is deep with wide receivers, offensive linemen, and pass rushers. So if you don't address that during free agency, it makes more sense to do it in the draft, and this is a good draft to do it. I think, and we've mentioned this on Wednesday, there are certain positions where they need to get young, and so why not use this draft to do it?
And there's a couple of things at play there, which is we don't know how free agency is going to go. And, if they solve, 4 of their top 5 needs in free agency, they probably don't have to do something like that. But the other thing is just how it all develops on draft night. They may have one guy who they really, really like, and all of a sudden that guy's sitting there at 31. So why trade out? You've got the guy you want. But I just think that this, like Herbie said, especially the positions that are deep, are the Chiefs' positions of need. Like, they're in a pretty good spot going into this draft because of that. I think there's going to be multiple guys. You can get a couple second-round picks. The way we saw them get, McCole Hardman and Juan Thornhill a couple years ago, I think they're going to have an opportunity to do something like that this year.
Yeah, look, I think they need to get starters in this draft. I think they need to get some, for lack of a better term, cheap labor. Out of this draft, because when's Mahomes' contract going to start blowing up, right? When is the team-friendly contract with Mahomes going to stop being team-friendly and taking up a much higher percentage of the salary cap? And so you need to find starters on rookie contracts, and probably more than what the Chiefs have done over the last several drafts.
Yeah, and the answer is this year. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is going to be counting $25 million against the cap. That's their second highest charge behind Frank Clark, I believe. Yep. And it's only going to grow from there, which is, that plays right into my thinking on the fact that if you can collect 2 or 3 guys, they don't have to be starters, but if you can rely on those guys to start for your team, you've got to have those guys play somewhere throughout your roster.
Okay, great conversation as always with Herbie Teope and Sam McDowell. Guys, we'll talk again soon. That'll do it for today. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC production staff of Derek Donovan, Beth Welsh, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. A tip of the cap to Herbie Teope and Sam McDowell for stopping by and talking Chiefs. Links to their stories can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, we got a deal for you. For limited time, you can subscribe to Sports Pass. That's the Kansas City Star's sports section on the web for 99 cents a month. That's right, 99 pennies a month. After 3 months, it auto-renews at $5.99 a month, unless you cancel. And what a time to subscribe. The Royals are at spring training, March Madness is right around the corner, and it's never not Chiefs season. How do you get it? You go to kansascity.com/sportspass2020. That is kansascity.com/sportspass KC.com/SportsPass2020. You want more than just sports coverage? Check out the entire Kansas City Star product: sports, news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional national news, sports, and business coverage with the e-edition. And by additional, I mean dozens more pages with the e-edition. The details for all of these deals can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And if you're having trouble hunting down any of these offers, send me an email, bkerkhoff@kcstar.com, and I will get you to the right place. So whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Wednesday with another episode.